sure. No problem.
Mitch, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Look at the wonderful weather we have in Seattle now. I can't believe this is actually Seattle.
No, gosh, we always look forward to these days, especially in those long, dreary winters where we're like, when is the sun coming?
Absolutely. Which part of Seattle are you in? East or west side? Are you in
I'm
the
over on the west
Seattle
side.
downtown
Yeah,
side?
west side. Yeah, we moved over here, moved from downtown right before the pandemic, basically, and have enjoyed the accidental island, as they call it, when the
Excellent.
bridge was out. You remember when West Seattle Bridge was out? So we got called the accidental island for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. That was just next to the Alaska Way, right? Right
Yep,
by
yep,
right by that portion. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Give us a 2 minute background for all the people listening. Mitch and I have known each other for a little bit of time, and he's been a marketing guy for the longest time. And I wanted to get his perspective on go to market. But Mitch, give us a 2 minute background.
Yeah, fast version of my story is, graduated college, decided to get into corporate growth and then quickly learned in that lane that I liked startups. And so in 1999, I think it was, I launched my first startup. And 10 startups later, I'm still doing the same thing. And love building companies. I've had the great pleasure of working on multiple continents and multiple countries and starting startups across different sectors, even from technology to oil and gas, kind of fun innovation across multiple places and love to be in that space. So yeah, my background is always learning. I kind of think of myself more like a constant student. What am I doing? What am I learning? How can I apply that to something new and something innovative?
Mitch, talk to me a little bit about take yourself in 1999, the growth of the internet, and then take yourself to 2023, Chat GPT and AI. What parallels do you see that are similar? Or what are the things that you see that are different? If you were an entrepreneur now versus you were an entrepreneur in 1999, very similar to me as well. What are the things that you see different? What are the things that you see same?
Yeah, great question. In by and large, like I think of it more like we have a lot more tools and a lot easier access to data and research than we ever had.
Mm,
That's what stands out to me today compared to then. The work and the time. For example, my first startup was launching new retail companies
yeah,
across, actually in the Northwest. And then we would do a lot of market analysis and a lot of research. Well, that was still largely a very human laborsome investment of time and energy to get that information. And now, with things like ChatGPT, we can pull that information super fast, or Claude, or any of the other platforms. We can get access to that data really fast. We can fact check the data pretty fast. We can even get down to like what's foot traffic and things of that nature in ways that we couldn't. So for me, it's been largely just this precipice of speed and growth and the accessibility of data. And then I would say the same thing is true. Like I've really evolved as an entrepreneur in just my exposure to more of a global context. We were global companies back then, but we're much more, it doesn't take much to get on a call or jump on a plane and even connect with organizations or people around the globe and
yeah.
getting to do that kind of work in, say, the Middle East or Africa that I'm doing here, you really learn that speed of information and data and culture has really been a big birth of growth for me personally. Outside of that, though, I feel like my daily strategic thinking is the same. The way I look at problems is the same. The way I try to solve those problems is the same. I'm just using better tools, if you will, to get to that information and, maybe different roles and different ways of thinking about it to some degree, but largely that's what I've been experiencing.
Let
Yeah.
me ask you another dimension. So you talked about the dimension of data access tools. That's one dimension. Do you think the ability and access to capital is the same, changed, more, easier, faster, harder?
Yeah, so when I think of it, I would slice it up from my personal experience. I think when you think about like VC dollars or large investment funds, I think the competition and speed at which they are looking at returns has drastically accelerated. It's been doing that for some time, and I think AI is only accelerating that. And in that sense, I think when you start thinking about a tech company using AI, I think that you have to be ready. You have to get ahead of the game a lot faster than you did in 1999. You're if you're not building up a defensible moat before you launch, you're in trouble and
Yeah,
you might
yeah.
as well start over. And that back in 1909, you had time to sort of make the mistakes, figure it out, see what you needed to do differently. And I think we have a little less window of that these days. And so for me, I think that's one of the things. I also think that because of the access of data, what I would call, sort of more of the bootstrapper route, where you're
Yeah,
looking
yeah,
for bootstrapping dollars, it's actually made it much more palatable. There's a lot more individuals looking for that, I think, for lots of reasons, meaning looking to invest in that way. And I think it goes back to we've kind of seen this birth of technology that's really um, opened our eyes to things that we could invest in or be interested in investing in, or we can see others wanting to, but doing such in a way that relational capital matters more now than ever. And so really getting to know folks. So I think this is why I see, at least in my startups, a lot more of the bootstrapping route being much more favorable for everyone, not just for me and my terms as a founder, but more in regards to like the return on investment for those individuals.
yeah.
It's not, it's a little less risky when you know who you're doing business with, and I think that that's been a big part of it.
Tell me a little bit about one of the words or some of the words that you use. You talked a little bit about build the moat and the differentiation before you launch. I'm paraphrasing, but you said, hey, some of the things that, obviously, number one, what I gather from what you said was competition is a lot more now than before. Previously, we'd compete with five, maybe 10 companies in the same space. Now it seems like 50 to 100 in the same space, right?
Exactly,
There's
exactly.
literally no barrier to entry. So when you talk about this build your defensibility before, what does that mean? How do you go about doing that? And how does AI help you with that, if at all?
Yeah, so I think I'll try to answer that in a sequential way. For me personally, that's constantly asking the question of like, what am I uniquely suited to present or to bring to market that would be really difficult for someone else to replicate or to bring something of challenging nature. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that I can use, for example, I've been working on an idea around the wine industry, and the
Yeah,
wine industry is wrought with lots of information. It's a data rich organization. Organizations are very data rich in that. Data is king, especially when you think about valuations of dollars. Well, if I just went to market with, say, a new platform that could give a winemaker real access to what are the vintages that are really selling on the market, and how
yeah,
can I get more of my product out there and at a higher price point. I wouldn't have much to be defendable. Like that data is out there, it's able to be sourced. Getting first to market is good, of course, if you're the first one to do it, but it's not going to be as defensible if I say, okay, well, what if I have a unique value proposition that brings together both consumer knowledge with that? And so, for example, let's say that you took a platform that's on the consumer side, like a Vivino, that really sources information for the consumer and says, okay, you've been drinking this wine, you might like this other wine.
yeah,
Well, if you start bringing the two libraries together from a relational standpoint, so what I'm thinking is more mid and small producers in the wine industry, you're actually going to be able to help that producer know what of their varietals appeal to what markets, and therefore export-import entries get a little more interesting. And so it's coming up with what's my complete knowledge base where I am actually building the relational capital with those individuals, that it would be really hard for someone to come and take those relationships away. That would be an
yeah, yeah,
example, right? Or in a less convoluted way, like even if I think of like, okay, what are the skill sets that I have in my repertoire that I can actually bring to market in the startup? It comes down to what are the well, I'll think of it in the terms of, I'm trying not to give away too much of what I'm working on. Um,
No, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Tell me
yeah, I
about how
think
you're using AI for that. Are you using
yeah,
AI for it at
I
all?
use
How are you using
AI.
it?
Yeah, I use AI a lot. I use it in simple ways, like I have custom GPTs that are research centric for me, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
I actually teach a lot on this topic. I think that when you build a custom GPT, it needs to be very narrow in scope. I tend to think narrow in breadth and deep in ability, versus like trying to get a GPT that does a multitude of things. It could be something as simple as like, I want to write a blog post. Well, if you want a GPT to do that, you shouldn't have the one that's doing the research on the content you're doing or writing on be the same one that's helping you edit that blog post. And so
yeah,
for me, I have GPTs that do research for very specific ideas. So it could be mathematical, it could be financial, but they're very individualized. I also use it a lot to keep me apprised of what's changing. So I have new source GPTs. So I used to use platforms like I don't I might be dating myself, but Flipboard. I don't know if you ever used.
Wow.
You know, I
Well,
love.
it still exists on Google, by the way. I still have it
Yeah,
on my Nokia phone.
I still have it as well, and I loved it because kind of before GPT, you could flip real fast through your data sources and then decide what you wanted to spend time reading on with a little brief summary. And GPT does that in such a better way. I have a GPT that just pulls from the sources that I'm looking at, what's changing, what's hit new on the market, and then I'm leveraging that. I also have a few tools that are not custom GPTs that do that. And then I use it a lot for ideation of ideas that I'm working on. And I should say I don't particularly, but inside of my organizations, the technical side of the house uses AI a ton. Everything from vibe coding to doing things like what can we do to leverage other written code in new projects, things of that
Yeah.
nature. So it's pretty much fully integrated in almost everything we do these days, including marketing. As we look at like what's happening in regards to getting content out, it used to be that you had to, maybe you draft a blog post, you get it posted on your website, then you push it out through your social media, and then you maybe want to put a series of follow-ons to that. All of those things were heavy labor intensive, and now with a lot of the AI tools out there, you can do that with one fail shot, and those are really powerful tools for marketing.
Let me ask you a question. We were both talking about this just before we started recording. I see two scenarios, Mitch, and you tell me which scenario might play out for you and which scenario might play out for a lot of other people. Let's say now the average person works for about, in the US, works about 50 hours a week. It's not 40. Most people don't work 40, and most people don't work 60 either. The average
Right.
person works between 40 and 50 hours. Let's make it 50 for the sake of discussion. Okay, now with AI, you can practically get that work done, let's say in about 30 hours. Let's say AI does nearly two-fifths of that work for you. 40% of the work, maybe even 30% of the work is done by AI. What you previously would have taken so much time to do, you're doing with AI. Now, there's a camp of people that would say, okay, so I'm going to do 30 hours of work and I'm going to take the rest of my time for myself. And there's another set of people that are going to say, I'm going to work 50 hours a week, but I'm going to get so much more done in that 50 hours. Now, entrepreneurs and people like us, we fall into the I don't know anything else. I'm going to work 50 hours. But I know a lot of people in my organizations that would say, no, I'm more productive. That means now I should get time to do other things like play guitar or whatever the heck it is. If you have more time, what do you think people will do?
I mean, so my personal application and my sort of belief on this is that as we fi I would say this that, progress doesn't like a vacuum, and when you create holes of time and you got like all this extra time, it's going to get filled with something.
Yeah,
And to your point, like,
it better not be Netflix. That
exactly.
seems to be what a lot of people do.
Yeah, but I think over time, if you're in that category where you're like, okay, I'm getting my work done in 30 hours, so therefore I have more time to just watch Netflix, you're doing yourself a pretty big disservice, in my opinion. Because life isn't changing. You're still going to continue to progress. Things are still going to move forward. And at some point, the work is going to shift away from the tactical things that we're doing today. It's not going to, I mean, I think everyone would say that like as technology is progressing, much of the repeatable tasks are going to go away. They're
Right,
going to be
right.
less of human centric. And so if you're not using that time to educate yourself, learn how to be a better strategic thinker, reading, whatever, like progressing your own thinking and abilities to come up with some better ways to use your time, I think you're missing it. So that's just philosophically speaking. For me personally, what I'd like to do every time I get up, I have sort of bookends of my day. The beginning of my day, I ask myself, what's on my plate that I need to do today? And before I start that, I ask the question of like, how much of that stuff that's on my plate could be automated? That's part of my new routine. Like, what
Yeah,
if that
yeah.
could be automated? And then the second question is, if I could automate these things, and gain time back, how would I spend my time differently? And for me, that's been what do I like to do? And it isn't watching Netflix for me. It is, as you pointed out, I like creating, I like solving problems. So I want to use my time to do more what I call deep work. What are the things that I'm doing to think really deeply on? What topics, problems that could be solved? What ways could we benefit the world in general with our efforts? And so for me, that's how that's what I probably in some people's Netflix, that's what actually makes me happy. That's what gives me rest. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like an energizing part of my day. And so for me, as I automate things, I'm just looking at like how do I repurpose that time for some of this work, this it's still work, but work that I enjoy doing. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
my counsel is just that, like, okay, if you're replacing your time with um if you're taking things off your plate through automation, AI, et cetera, figure out how you can replace that with work that you find joyful, work that you find meaningful, work that actually gives you value.
Which
Because
doesn't seem like work. It
no,
won't be work. It'll be like,
yeah, it
oh,
won't
I'm
feel
having
like
fun.
work. Yeah. Yeah. If I'm definitely subscribe to the thinking that we're just designed to work as humans, and we should find ways to use that in our highest and best use. Like, how can we do that well and enjoy our days and feel motivated by it? And that could be, you mentioned play the guitar. That could be work. There's nothing wrong with taking that time and be like, you know what, I'm going to learn. In fact, I mentioned earlier about the wine scenario. Part of the reason I'm talking about wine is because one of the things I decided to do this year was learn to be an enologist. Just purely
Nice.
because it seems like a very interesting space to be in, and I'm spending my nights doing that now that I have that time back. And so, yeah, I think it's figuring out ways to learn and grow as a person.
Let me ask you something. 1999 versus now. What does AI first thinking mean to you? In 1999, we were like internet first. First
Yep.
thing you got to do is how do I do this on the internet, right? And then
Yep.
we, of course, in 2006, 2012, we were like cloud first or mobile first. Now it is AI first. I mean, mobile first thinking essentially said, don't worry about anything in terms of location. Cloud first said, don't worry anything in terms of spending a lot of money to get hardware. Internet first essentially meant no middlemen, right? What does AI first thinking mean?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, that's a big question, and I'll answer it hopefully in succinct way here. When I think about startups, one of the big narratives right now is that, there's this idea of single founder startup, right?
Yeah.
That now with AI, you don't need a technical co-founder, you don't need, kind of just you could go through it. You don't need a CMO, you just need AI. Well, again, this probably goes back to the beginning, which is like I don't think you don't need I don't think single founder startups are a good idea for lots of reasons that aren't related to the work that needs to be done and it's more about having the team around you that's going to do the things that technology can't do, like to be the trusted sources for walking through what is the next step, and are we strategically thinking about this thing the correct way? Are we building those defensible moats? Do we know where we're going to go? And so for me, a big part of when I think of AI first, the first thing I'm thinking is like, okay, if AI can replace XYZ roles that we would normally hire for right out of the gate or as we're scaling, great. What could let's do that. Let's start with what can AI solve and then ask the question. And now that AI is solving that thing, not how can we put more money in my pocket right now, but what could I do that would accelerate my business in ways that it hadn't? What kind of hire would it be? I'll just throw out some ideas. Maybe it's a clinical psychologist that evaluates it from a psychological standpoint. Maybe it's someone who is a cultural relevant expert. Maybe it's something of these nature. It could depend on the product, but for me, I'm always asking like, if I could add people to my team, because if you've ever built a company, I know in the early days for me, I always was like, I wish I had more money, because if I did, I would hire this kind of person. And you never really end up hiring that kind of person for your team because you're too busy in those early days hiring the folks you need, not the folks you want. And I shouldn't say those can't be the same, but oftentimes there are team members that I'll be like, well, I would love to add this kind of person to our team, but our budgets don't allow for that. So for me, it's really thinking like that. It's thinking more creative around how AI can help solve. It's also in how can I use it as a teammate, right? I'm treating it much like a teammate. I'm
Yeah,
asking,
yeah.
I'm asking it questions. I'm bouncing off ideas, and I'm still doing that through the lens of how do we do this as a team, and what does that look like? But really, yeah, it's really more what are the I think so much of startup building in general has always been about what are the tasks that you need to get done. Well, now AI has really shifted that landscape, right? You don't
Yeah,
need to think about that because AI can do the task. So then what? What are the things that you can do that you need to be doing on a startup side? This is back to the beginning of our question of like, so many startups out there really trying to do a lot. And if you're just trying to compete on speed to market, you better hope you have the biggest bank account and you have the right scientists on the AI because you're just going to get outrun, outpaced. And if that's your goal, more power to you. But I think that there's a lot of really interesting problems we can solve when we take a step back and get out of the speed game and look at, okay, yeah, we need to be fast about this. We need to get to market with these things. But what could we do that's more defensible outside of just pure speed? Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think sometimes the speed is a defensible moat, but only for the first sprint. It's like you're going on a 100-yard sprint. The speed gives you a little bit of an advantage for the first 10 yards, and you don't realize the race is a 100-yard race. It's not a 10-yard race. You're like, oh, I got
exactly.
right out of the gates very quickly. Well, you got to keep that intensity for 100 yards, but that's when you win. You don't win with first 10 yards out of the gate fast.
That's absolutely well said. Yeah, well said.
Awesome. This was great, Mitch. I'm glad we connected. I'm going to keep coming back to you once in a while. Hope you have a lot of fun with the new startups and terrific making sure that we covered a lot of different topics, but terrific making sure that we covered the key elements we wanted.
Sounds great. Yeah, it's good to see you as always and great to catch up and anytime. Looking forward to it.